My friend Bert here made me this spool for winding my binding for my quilt, and it's just been a real godsend because I just started on the spool here, put it into the holder here, and then I just wind it up. And this binding is a queen-sized binding, so it was fairly long. So it's
Hi, I'm Bert Delisle, and last month, or actually in January, at the Lancaster Woodturners Coffee Hour, put up a picture of a device that he made for his wife. She happens to be a quilter, and she was going to use this as a binding bowl. And I have lots of quilting friends, so I decided maybe I should try and make one. And I had to do all the design of mine just from this one picture. So what I've done is started off with a drawing. So I started off making a drawing, what I thought was fairly accurate to what, and so I made a drawing to scale, made another drawing from a different view, just so I could fully understand what I'm trying to do. And then, because I wanted to use bird mouth joinery to use up a lot of small pieces, I made a chart. And I made a chart using information from Lee Valley on bird mouth joinery tools. So this is your bird mouth joinery tools information. It has calculations for the 6-sided, 8-sided, 12, and 16 for the length and the width, and it shows you how to set the bits up, and it gives you a bit of a description on how to use the tools even to make cones. So without further ado, I'm going to take the opportunity to go out into the shop and see if my drawings and my plan actually work out. So we'll come back when we get back to the shop and start cutting some pieces. Okay, so here I'm back in the shop, and we've got a bunch of oak pieces here that are actually reclaimed doors, wooden doors. It was all solid oak, and I couldn't stand to see it go into a burn pile or a landfill, so I'm going to process it into pieces so I can make some more of these quilter binding barrels. Alrighty, let's get this show underway. Okay, I have a bunch of oak pieces machined up. Got square edges on each one. They've got a finish on them. And I'm going to bird's mouth these, but in order to make the bird's mouth joint go wood on wood, I'm going to run through my thickness sander. So we'll run a bunch of these through, and then we'll come back when we're ready to go to the router table. Okay, here we are at the router table, and I've just been reviewing the information on the controlling of the fit. And so by raising or lowering the bird's mouth bit, you can affect the final outcome on the diameter. So I've cut my staves to the right dimensions, and now I'm going to minimize the removal of material so I get the maximum size of binder bowl, because my target diameter is 110 millimeters. So I'm going to set the depth of cut on a trial piece here, and once I have the height and the depth of cut, then I'll go ahead and machine the rest of the pieces. One of the things that's recommended is use of a sacrificial fence, and you may be able to see here that the bit has actually cut itself a groove in the sacrificial fence, but the sacrificial fence allows this piece of wood to be supported all the way across the cut. If it wasn't there, as soon as you got on the either side of the bit, it might want to wobble. So having a sacrificial fence is definitely a plus. So I'll turn the dust collector on and start this process. Put marks on here so I can touch all the pieces so that I can do a test fit on the ring. Because this is a 612 bird's mouth bit, if I turn these around and put the thick part to the center, it'll be a six-sided box, but it'll be quite a bit smaller. So, and then of course, before I glue anything up, I would definitely get rid of all the little burrs. But for just getting a rough idea of how big the dimension of this is going to be, we'll put these together. And we'll see if we got a band that'll fit on here. And so when I glue these together, I just use a hose clamp. And okay, so now with that amount of bird's mouth, the diameter of this is going to be, the center is about 110. And so outside dimension is about 124, and the inside dimension is about 85. But my target for the inside dimension is at least 100 millimeters. So there's enough material, if I use this setting on the bird's mouth bit, that will allow me to make binding barrels with inside dimension of at least 100 millimeters, or roughly 4 inches. And that's what I've been told by Carol when she did the test on the prototypes, is that the one that I'd made for her, the one she likes the best, is about 90 millimeters inside diameter. And she did a queen size quilt with no problem. However, she thought that when she does a king size, that particular barrel would be slightly too small. So we agreed that the next one would be a minimum of 100 millimeters inside dimension, and if I can, I'll sneak it even a little bigger than that. But for a king size quilt, my target for these binder barrels is going to be 100 millimeters inside dimension. Okay, we're back at the bandsaw, and according to my drawing, the finished wall height of the barrel should be 80 millimeters. But I may have to take a little bit off to trim the ends and to do the final finish on the top. So I tend to make my staves prior to turning probably 100 millimeters or maybe even 90 millimeters to give me a little bit of room to be able to chuck it. And what I built on my lathe here, or on my bandsaw, is I like to lay the pieces in here on this sled, and I use a relief block here to get the measurement. So I can set the blade measurement. Oh, this looks like this cross-speed sled won't work. It's bigger than my dimension. No problem. I'll use my miter fence, my table saw miter fence on here, and I want to set these about probably 95 millimeters. I need an 80 millimeter finish dimension, so if I make these 90 millimeters, that'll give me 5 millimeters on each end for errors in glue up and final finish when I mount it in the base. So I'll go ahead and cut these. This fence is now set for the 90 millimeters to the saw blade. I can just loosen this, slide this back, and now when I put my pieces for cutting on here, I can slide them on here, push them up against the guide, and when I cut them, they'll be the length that I need them at. So I can stack quite a few on here to make this a little easier. Now I've got to turn the dust collection on and we'll get started. Okay, we're back at the glue up station. First thing I do when I'm gluing them up is I want to get rid of all the little fuzzies, just where the bandsaw was a little bit aggressive. You know, get rid of the fuzzies so that the corner joint will be a nice, crisp, 90-degree joint in the bird's mouth. So when I get all of these trimmed up, I'll come back and we'll proceed with the glue up. Okay, we're back, and it's time to do a little bit of glue up. So the easiest way to do this is just take some Titebond 3 and just run a little bit in the grooves, and I'll take my little brush and spread it out. We'll stand up the staves, put a couple clamps on, and we'll be in business. I just make sure that there's a good coating of glue down in the 90-degree joint, because the quite a bit of the wood is going to get turned away. So if there's a little bit of dry spot on the outside, it's not going to impact the structure of the barrel, because the barrel wall thickness is going to be well, it'll be about 5 or 6 millimeters thick. So as long as there's a good coating right in the 90-degree joint, then there'll be lots of contact. Okay, and I just lay a hose clamp up here, and I just start standing these up in so the short beak goes to the inside. And just make sure that it's nice and level, and just give it a little tap of the hammer. Flip it over. And then we'll tighten them up. Done. And I got a nice little squeeze out on every one of the joints. So that one's done. We'll wait 24 hours and put it on the lathe. Okay, so I've got a set of blocks here that I glued up yesterday, and they're ready to rough turn to round so that we can get them in a chuck. And in order to accomplish that, I'm going to put on this jam chuck. It'll fit in my Talon jaws with the number 3 jaws. And I'll slide this tapered jam chuck on my tailstock. It's threaded 3/4 10. And then I'll take a look at the block here and I'll say, okay, the way these things are oriented, it'll be the easiest to turn it, try and figure out which way to turn it to make it easiest. This will fit on here. It's tapered, so it'll kind of help center it. This one here is tapered as well, so that's centered it. So now this block is basically centered, roughly centered, and it's between centers. So I should be able to turn the outside round, and I can turn the outside to a almost finished dimension, and I'll put a chucking mechanism on each end so that I can mount it to hollow the inside. So I'll just grab my face shield and we'll turn that. I always turn the barrel first so that I know the outside dimension, because when I go to do the base, I need to know how big of a bore to put in the base so I can inset this in a little bit so I get good glue contact. Okay, so here we've got the overhead view, and up here in the picture-in-picture we got the tailstock view, so we'll see how that goes. We'll take a little look at it and see. Looks like it's coming along nicely. I can move my tool rest in a little bit. Maybe raise it up just a hair.
look at it there. We're getting it nice and round. We got a little bit more to go to get it round. Okay, that looks like it's nice and round. What I normally try to do now is I'll put a V-groove. I'll put a V-groove on either end, and then I can grab it with my number 3 or number 4 jaws on my stronghold. So I've got this held in my number 4 jaws on the stronghold, and even though it's a fairly opened up, and there will be marks on the outside of this barrel, but it does have some clearance between the end of the barrel and the chuck, or the chuck jaws, and it also has a groove on this end. So I'm going to be able to hollow this out and get the inside dimension that I want. Once I have the inside dimension that I want, I can finish one end down to the diameter that I want the outside, and I can actually fit a base onto it and glue it, and then I can hold it from the base and finish the top. So now that I've got this securely held in here, I'm going to go ahead and hollow this out. Now to hollow this out, I'm going to use a hunter tool. I find that it works really nicely for hollowing this oak. It's pretty versatile. I'm going to put a little light on the subject. I've got my handy dandy little magnet light here. This is a Cindy Drozda design. Works really nicely for looking inside. I don't know if you'll be able to see that on the camera, but it sure gives me a lot of room to see what I need to see. Now I'm not 100% sure if you're going to be able to see if I'm going to be in your way while I'm hollowing this, but I can try and swing this around a little bit. Hollowing 101. So we'll take a quick look and see what the dimension is. And it looks like we're at 110 millimeters already, so that's fine. I'll be able to just clean this out. That'll give me the inside dimension that I want. I'll just go ahead and finish hollowing this as deep as I can, and we'll go from there. With that little hunter tool, it has quite a bit of vibration when it's hanging over the tool that far. tool rest that far, so I'm just going to check and see. Okay, so I've got quite a bit to come off. Here I've got I've got 112, 114. So I've taken enough off of here that I don't need to take any more. So what I'm going to do, because it vibrates so much when I'm overextended, I'm just going to sand the inside of this and straighten it, and I'm going to straighten the face off of here, and then I'm going to switch over to making a base block. And once I make the base block, I'll mount this on the base block, and the base block will have a recess, and then I'll be able to turn it around, and I can do whatever I want to do on the outside of this once it's mounted on the base block. So this is going to be the base block I'm going to use. It's just a piece of oak. Looks like it's big enough. I'll mount it up on the lathe and get it ready. So now I'm just going to size the tenon. This is going to inset a little bit into the barrel. So I'll be touching this point on the wood and see where the mark is. It should line up with this one without touching this one. And then I'm just going to use a spindle gouge to cut in and make a little bit of a tenon and keep fitting it onto the barrel. Just about, not quite, just a little. That's got it. Okay, so I'm going to take this over and I'm going to attach this to this, and once that glue is set, then I can go ahead and finish the outside and finish hollowing this side and blend it in. I'm going to flatten this center section off and put a hole in it for the dowel that's going to be driving the or for the spindle. Oops. So once I've got that mounted on there, then and this glue is set up, then it's just a simple matter of finishing the outside, maybe putting a bit of a design on it. There's lots of wall thickness on here. There's probably, well, there'll be 7 or 8 millimeter wall thickness even when I get it to finished dimension. Smooth it off a little bit. That'll be more than enough room for a king-size quilt binding. And on the next step is to build a spool. Okay, so we're back. We've got the binding barrel to this stage. The stave construction is all glued together. I've hollowed the inside. This particular one is approximately 100 millimeters in diameter on the inside. I drilled a hole in the center for the spike, and the next stage now is to put the slot on. Actually there's a slot on either side, and the main reason for that is because I do it here on the bandsaw. In order to do it on the bandsaw safely, we've got to be able to hold this at an angle and push it through without this thing flopping around. So in order to accomplish that, I made myself a little jig. Just a simple little jig, piece of plywood, 90-degree plywood face up here. This here is 1.25 inches to 8
adapter which fits my chuck. And so I can take my chuck with the workpiece attached, and you screw it onto the adapter. And now with this firmly attached to the adapter, I can now hold this by hand here and run it through the saw. A different angle on it here. So initially I thought I could run it straight through by using the fence, and I probably could, but that would just give a straight slot. And one of the things that we've noticed is that it, don't know if it makes any difference to the quilters, but it's kind of aesthetically pleasing to see the slot come through on an angle. And so in order to accomplish that, I just freehand it. I line it up where I think is roughly approximately center, and I start at the top. And voila, we have a slab on both sides. And now I can take this over to my little power vise over there, and I can mount the chuck on the power vise, and we can sand these. So we'll go over and do that and take a look at how that works. So I've got this little power vise here. It's called a pana vise, and what it can do is it allows me to swivel around, go up and down, turn it however I like. It makes it kind of handy for doing jobs like we're about to do here. I take this particular workpiece, and it screws, the chuck just screws right onto the vise. Okay, and so that's clamped on there, and now I can take my piece of sandpaper and sand these grooves. I can position this however I want to make it easy to get at, and I'll get my sandpaper and we'll clean it up. So basically it just holds it in place, so you can take this and just deburr the edges, do a little polishing on the very bottom. And it sure makes it nice to be able to hold the workpiece in the vise. And when I want to rotate it around, I just loosen this off and rotate it to the other side. And do the same thing. And there we go. And if I wanted to take and do the next one, take this off. I can grab the next one. So one of the things I never mentioned is that if there is an imperfection in the wall, and you wanted to take the advantage of cutting that imperfection out, what we can do now is loosen this off and rotate. We can rotate this however we want to get that imperfection. So right now there's a bit of an imperfection right there, but if I take we're running through the bandsaw, I can actually cut that imperfection out, and I don't have to worry about trying to fill anything. Again, my hands are back here. The bandsaw is running through the wood. It's not going to tip over. It's nice and solid, and I just have to be careful not to go too far, too deep.
There we go. I suppose I could just clamp this down and do the sandpapering right here too. So just took just a regular clamp on here. And I could do the sanding right here on this place. I like using the little pan of ice because I can take this over to my other bench and do it when I'm sitting down, or if I have 3 or 4 of these made, well then I can do 3 or 4 of them at a time. So that's it for that stage. Okay, so now we've got the binding barrel built, we got the slots put in, it's sanded up. The next step is to make a spindle. So there'll be a 1/4 inch steel post will stick up in the center. There's a 1/4 inch hole, or a little bigger than a 1/4 inch hole in the bottom. This will slip in top, and the idea there is that they can spin their binding onto this spool until it's full. Then they can sit this on the table and pull the binding out as they need it. So this is the next step. So to make one of these, I just start with any random scrap of wood. You're going to turn it into a disc. And there's not a critical dimension on the diameter. The only critical diameter on here is that this must be quite smaller than the barrel by probably a 5 millimeters all the way around. So if the barrel was 100 millimeters, then this would probably be 90 or less. It's not critical on the dimension on here because they wrap their material around the spindle. But in order to start with, I got a rough piece of wood here that I just roughed out a little bit round. I'm going to do a friction hold. The center point was marked when I used the compass to scratch out a rough circle on it. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my recess tool. This recess tool was inspired by a tool that Mike Peace showed on one of his videos. And basically what it does is it holds the angle of the cutting edge on an angle so that this relief here allows you to get in beside your you can get in beside the live center, set it on here, and you can put in a recess where if you had a straight a dovetail tool, they're usually right in the way and you have interferes with your live center. So this one here is really handy. You can come in on an angle and make it as big as you need. So I'm going to go in and put one on here for my a little bit smaller chuck than this, but I'll put in a recess. First step, you get the face shield, and we'll see how that works. You'll be able to see how this is going. And that's as simple as that goes. So this is really handy. So what I do now is I'll take this, and hopefully I made that big enough for my smaller chuck, and yeah, perfect. So I'll grab this in expansion. And I'll turn it around. Okay, so I'm gonna drill a hole in here, and that's where I'll mount the spool onto. So I'll just switch my tailstock out here for a drill chuck. And I'm going to put a 5/8 inch hole in this, and I'll be able to mount the spindle with a 5/8 tenon. And as per usual, when I make these, I never make just one. I'm usually making 3 or 4 at a time. This particular case, I've made some extras here, so I'm going to go ahead and drill these out while I've got the drill bit in the lathe. Okay, so now we've got these, got the holes drilled in. I'm ready to accept the spindle. But one of the things that I like to do is I like to take the recess off. And in order to take the recess off and finish the bottom off a little bit nice and smooth, and get the thickness of the disc down a little bit, is I need some way to hold it on the lathe to take this off. And one of the things I found that works for me is I use my number 3 jaws. Number 3 jaws on my stronghold chuck. So they're about 3.5 inches across. Or about 80 millimeters, something like that. And if I put this in here, it doesn't want to fit very good. But I'm only taking really light cuts off the center. So what I can do is I can put a ring like this inside the, this is just a piece of ABS pipe, sewer pipe actually, 3-inch sewer pipe. I can set that in there. And now if I set this in, I have to open the chuck up enough to get that pushed in against the base of the chuck. And the plastic then grabs the outside of the disc and it doesn't mar it at all. Whoop. And then I'm able to come in with my bowl gouge and just get rid of the recess and leave this a little bit of an indent. And when people look at it, this can either be facing up for the material to set in, mount the spindle from this side, or I can just gently remove this ridge and make that the bottom, so it looks like it's sitting on the outside perimeter, when in fact it may or may not touch the outside perimeter because it'll set on the post. But this way here, it gets rid of the evidence of how we held it. So now I've got the disc, and we'll be able to make a little spindle. We've got a blank like this. We'll take this blank. I'll turn a tenon on here that'll just fit. And again, when I make one of these things, I very seldom ever only make one of anything. So if I make one and make a mistake, I have to start all over. So this way I usually I make 2 or 3 or 4 blanks, and then that way if one screws up I can adjust it without losing all of the project. So on this particular one, I only drilled part way through here. I could make this a little thinner and get down to the hole, or I can leave it that thick. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't impact the functionality of it. If I wanted to hold this out a little bit further, I could use something like this. Put a spacer in here that would hold it out a little bit further. I can put a couple of spacers in here. And now when I grab this, the workpiece will be a little bit proud, but that means I'll be able to make the disc a little bit thinner. Okay, that allowed me to get in, make this thing a little thinner, clean off the bottom. This particular one looks like it has a bit of a dish here. I think I'll probably use that for the material side and call this flat one the bottom. But it could work either way. And again, I'll put the spacers in there so I can make it a little thinner disc. One of the things I found too, using the plastic like this, I make sure that the gap in the plastic is on one of the jaws, so that if it isn't a perfect circle, which here it is not a perfect circle, but here, because the points are digging in, they're digging into the plastic, they're not digging into the wood. They're squeezing the plastic, but they're not getting in deep enough to mark the wood. Okay, so I've mounted up a spindle here that I'm going to use to make one of these spindles. I'm going to put a tenon on this side to fit into the 5/8 hole of the disc, and then I'll go ahead and shape this. The object here is to make the spindle with enough room. This looks like this one is about 70 millimeters. Before here, I think I'll make the next one's about 80 millimeters. That dimension of the spindle is not critical, but aesthetically it would probably look good if this is sitting on the disc on the very bottom. If there's a profile here, the profile should be roughly in line with the top of this. So this particular one is about 75 millimeters deep. This particular one is 85 millimeters deep. So I generally make these to fit the barrel so they kind of look aesthetically pleasing. And on some of them I may even elect to put the spindle in here, put another tenon on, and put a full disc on the top. That's just for aesthetics. It doesn't do anything to the functionality. But we'll see where it goes. So this particular tool I made is just a wrench, and I sharpened up one side on the grinder. I sharpened this edge so it'll actually cut. This is just the reference. I bring it in, put it on the this on the wood, slide it up, and then push it in. And this does a cut to a 5/8 tenon. What I always like to do then is to verify that it actually fits by taking the piece off. And usually it's like that. It's just a little bit tight, but I like that better than being loose. So I'll put it on and take a real light cut. Just need to take a little bit off the very back. But it's got a nice squeaky fit, so it'll hold glue really well. Put that in there. Drop that in there and take a look and see what the profile looks like. I think that's going to be just fine. That'll be big enough they'll be able to see it. I'm going to just take this down to a bit of a point, sand it off, and that'll be a finished project. So there we have it. We have one Quilter's binding barrel. It's got a spool on here. The spool fits on the little spike in the center. This turns really nice and freely. They can load this spindle up with their binding material, drop it in the holder, and then as they're feeding it out when they're sewing, this will keep their binding nicely contained on the table, not on the floor, and makes it a nice little organization tool. Good enough. That's it.